Welcome back to the Created Economy. It's our weekly news show on everything happening in the creator economy. I'm Greg Narain, one of your hosts, joined by my friend Ken.
Hello, hello.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you here. And in case you don't know, if this is your first time tuning in, what we do here is we bring you a roundup of all the latest news and commentary. We bring in amazing founders and startups and try to interview them and get their point of view on what's happening in the creator economy. Our goal is to take a deep dive into the space and give you everything you need to know to understand what's happening. We do go live on Wednesdays at 3 p.m. This is our 5th week in a row. Then we're about to take a break. Sorry. But in case you don't know, you can find out more over at created.show. It is the official show page. Has a list of all of our upcoming episodes. You can RSVP over there. We also stream live. So if you're listening or hearing us right now, you may be listening on Clubhouse, you may be on a Twitter space. You also could be watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch, or LinkedIn Live, by the way. So pick your poison, whatever you prefer. We've got you covered no matter where you are. This is an interactive show, though. So I think it's important for you to remember that the way we run the show is that Ken and I will do the news. Holy crap, shut up. For the first 10 minutes or so. And then after that, we will actually bring Alex in, our guest, to join us in a bit of convo to reflect on the news. But that is also your chance to jump in. So if you're listening, get your hands raised buttons ready. If you're out there watching on video, feel free to leave a comment. But we bring our guests in live to also react to the news. Then we'll have a small bit of an interview with Alex and talk to him and do a deep dive, maybe even get a demo of what he's building. And then after that, we'll probably do a little bit of our After Dark. But maybe today I have to go. I have a family emergency. But what we can do is that if you would like to join in the questioning or anything along the way, by all means, just raise your hand, and we'll try to make it as interactive as possible today. So last little bit of housekeeping. We do post the show notes and all of our transcripts and everything over at createdeconomy.com. It's our official show page. And our site. And in addition, you will be able to follow along on Twitter at Created Economy, because we live share all of the links from today's episode as we go through the stories. So, Ken, let's jump right into it. I may have to go even sooner than I thought, but I apologize, but you're in good hands. Alex is here today. So do you want to say hi before we jump into it?
Well, I think, let's jump right into it. But hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. And we got an exciting week of news. So, Greg, I think you are first up on what's going on.
All right. Yes. So welcome back to episode 5, it's June 16th. Follow us in real time, as I mentioned, at Created Economy. Ken will be sharing links to every article we mentioned right now. So what's happening in the news? Let's jump into some creator economics for start. I have a lot of research actually that came out in the last week or so I'm happy to share that. Our friend Neil Robertson, who was here just a few weeks ago, CEO of Influence.co, they have released their 2021 Creatorscape. If you aren't familiar with the Creatorscapes, it's a great vantage point on or an attempt to organize all of the crazy companies inside of the creator economy into a variety of buckets. I forgot how many. I think there's like 500 plus companies or something in this Creatorscape alone. I know at least a couple of my companies are in here, so I was happy to see that we made it finally. But yeah, you can find out more. Ken's just shared a link, by the way. So take a look, but you can head over and download the Creatorscape. Neil is going to have a long form post coming out on his newsletter soon. And in addition, he usually releases the data set. So if you want to do any other work on it, you'll be able to get to it from there. Another bit of research that I did see come out this week that I thought was just super interesting. Ken and I were chatting about it. So a number of surprises in here. But there's a creator earnings benchmark report that was done by NeoReach and Influencer Marketing Hub. Now, I will caveat and say that NeoReach tends to reach an Instagram-centric or heavy audience, I would say. So some of these findings may be skewed a little bit, like maybe not necessarily representative of the entire creator economy, but still some really cool things out there, right? A couple of the top lines that I did see, in their summary, $800 million in venture capital has been invested in the creator economy since October 2020. That's insane, right? Almost $1 billion since October. Another thing that they saw, the total creator economy market size is estimated to be around $104.2 billion. I've always wondered what this number was. I really wasn't sure what the methodology was, but I thought it was really interesting. But they do line it up with the gig economy and sort of that trajectory. And so there's an opportunity potentially for it to be into the trillions going forward. And what was your other favorite? This is like, for example, of like where I think the skewing is a little weird. 72% of creators prefer Instagram, identify it as their primary content platform. That's probably going to be true with NeoReach as sort of like, the originating source. Not to say that creators don't prefer or like Instagram, but I think that may be just a little bit high in general. So check the comments, check our Twitter if you want access to a link to that research as well. This was the last one I think that I had in this batch. I might be wrong though. But the war on Apple just continues. This week we saw a really interesting and amazing thread come out from Jasmine. I believe she's one of the co-founders of Fan House, and Apple basically cracked down recently and suddenly like rewrote their rules to include creator apps into sort of their new 30% fees. And so there's been some interesting dynamics here because the Fan House folks put together this great video, and they have like all these creators talking about like what 30% means to them, right? In case you're not aware, we talked about it a little bit last week, but the natural fee on Apple and it's Google also, right, Ken?
Yeah, it's Google and Apple are all taking like 30%. That's what
they 30%.
They're in a bunch of hot water over that with antitrust and everything.
So there's a lot of people. Legion's written a post about is Apple holding back their creator economy? Now they've gone after Fan House, which was doing maybe $1 million a year, I believe, in bookings through their app. But Fan House only takes 10%. And so suddenly now they want to take a third. And what, Fan House, Jasmine was suggesting was like, hey, why don't you take a third of what we take, right? Like we'd be okay with that, but taking a third off the top from the creator is pretty egregious. The interesting loophole here, Patreon, which does have an app, opens a web view to process transcriptions and is somehow skirted around this sort of behavior. And so there's been a lot of people sort of asking the questions like, well, if Patreon's really pro-creator, why aren't they doing more, speaking up, putting their voice and their weight behind this to get more people exempted in? I don't know if that's entirely fair, but either way, this war is brewing, and I'm just really interested to see where it tracks to in the future. Ken, is this you?
Yep. Everything on the rest of this deck is for me, actually.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. I will be back in a minute. Let me just check on my son.
All right. So I'm going to switch over here. Let me move to this one here. Sorry. So we're talking about the creator economy here. And so the first story that we have that on my list is from TikTok, is from Variety, talking about how VidCon's title sponsor will be TikTok this year. Now, since 2013, YouTube has been the title sponsor, but it's almost like it's a passing of the torch when TikTok took over. So as part of this, they're going to have top talent and their executives that are going to be part of VidCon's main tracks. They're going to be able to. They're going to have they're going to broaden their reach, and it's shocking to see that YouTube's taking over in this capacity. Is being ousted in this capacity, because for a long time YouTube creators have been kind of like the big thing in the space, and now this is almost like TikTok's taking the crown, and now social media and the creator economy is all saying, look, this is the way to go. But if you look at where creators are going and where brands are going, it's really not TikTok. It's still with Facebook. How long will TikTok remain as a title sponsor for years to come? That'll be interesting to see. All right, so our next one is around newsletters. Look, everyone loves emails. I mean, who doesn't, right? I mean, but so there's been a lot of news, pun intended, around newsletters. And so the first one is those that are on the receiving Substack newsletters or review newsletters or anything like that. The problem that's servicing is how can those newsletters get through with those that are on with readers that have Gmail or a Google email service, right? Because the spam filters are filtering out these newsletters, and so that could hinder the delivery and reception of these newsletters for creators. Another concern is Apple's new privacy setting that came out with Mail that was announced at WWDC, where users of Apple Mail can now prevent tracking. So newsletters creators won't be able to know if somebody's actually read their newsletter, won't be able to see which links have been clicked, which could potentially impact future revenue if they have any like affiliate links or anything of the sort that would help boost their business. Now, in the past few weeks, again on the newsletter side, Facebook's supposed to come out with their version of Substack, which is called Bulletin. The downside here is that it's not going to be a free-for-all, very much like Substack. They're going to be curating it specifically towards the newsletter writers that they want, and it's not going to be around all topics. It would be specifically things like maybe food or travel, but not really politics or anything super controversial. But so don't hold your breath in terms of getting access to Bulletin. It'll be very curated, and it'll be privy to those that Facebook curries favor on. Now, another thing for newsletters is coming from Review, which is now owned by Twitter. They're going to make it easier for people to subscribe to Review newsletters with a prompt that's going to be available on the bios, directly on Twitter profiles. So that'll hopefully increase subscriptions for creators, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, would you be interested in this? Would this help you to further your audience? Let me know in the chat.
If you have a newsletter right now, drop a link in the comments so everyone can see it. We'd love to know. And raise your hand. We'd love to chat with you about it after.
All right. So who doesn't love social audio? I mean, that's the name of the game, right? And yesterday, Facebook tested out its Clubhouse competitor, but there's no real timeline on when that's actually going to be released. But it was based on people that attended the private, well, not really private, the public preview of this service. It basically seemed very similar to Clubhouse. So I don't know if I'm impressed or worried about Facebook. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, all right, we're going to do social audio. It's kind of expected. What's the bells and whistles? What's really going to stand out? And it's probably going to be Facebook's tremendous reach that you can have, very similar to Twitter, over Clubhouse. I know we've had conversations in the past about, can Clubhouse survive with all these up and coming services, and whether or not Clubhouse is more like a feature versus an actual platform. So, the heat is on for Clubhouse to find ways to differentiate itself. And as we get further into the news, this is going to be pretty apparent that Clubhouse has its work cut out for it. And now talking about Clubhouse and podcasting, which will lead us to our great conversation with Alex, let's talk about podcast, right? So Apple announced this subscription service. They just launched subscriptions and channel offerings. So now you can do, now creators with podcasts can do in-app subscriptions and offer specific bonus content for paying listeners. Spotify announced their Clubhouse spinoff called rival rather, called Green Room, which basically turns your live audio into a podcast. So it does it all in one fell swoop, right? So this is actually pretty good for competitors. And now Facebook supposedly next week is going to launch podcast support on Pages. So you're going to be able to not only curate your podcast directly onto your fan page or your own page via an RSS feed, but you're also going to be able to include snippets as well. And I think Facebook's advantage here is the reach that you can have on the social network. So, I mean, there's a lot of podcasting news, a lot of newsletter news that's happening this week. Very curious to hear what Alex thinks in terms of all of this going down. So, next thing here is when you are, if you want to find out everything that's going on here with the creator economy, be sure to check out our Flipboard magazine at Creator Economy, and we can go from there. That'll have not only just all the articles we curated today for this week, but it's also going to include, it also has a magazine where you're going to be able to see everything that's going on in the creator economy, the latest news that we won't necessarily be able to cover on this show. And now let's talk to Alex. Let's bring him on. Hello, Alex.
Hey,
how are you?
Thank you. So good. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. I really hope that Greg's family emergency is nothing serious.
Oh, I'm sure he's fine. I mean, he's, those entrepreneurs are just always so busy with everything. So I'm sure everything is fine, and he'll be back joining us soon. But in the meantime, you and I can have a great conversation without him hoarding in on things, and we can get down into the nitty gritty about what's going on with podcasting. So Alex,
Absolutely.
before we get into it, why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience and tell us what you're doing with GetVokl and podcasting?
Perfect. Would love to. So I'm the CEO and founder of Vokl, and we think of it as a Clubhouse with video, right? Or StreamYard with a social aspect and a discovery component connected to all of that, right? Or another way of thinking of Vokl would be Twitch for podcasters. That's what we do. And the hypothesis that we have is that podcasting really is, it's a medium that is changing and is converging with all kinds of other mediums. And social audio is one form of that. And we're very much banking on this trend.
Cool. So what are you seeing in terms of, we were talking about, I was talking about all the podcasting news that's going on with Apple, with Spotify, with Facebook. Like, what do you make of all of that? And where do you see the podcasting landscape kind of going? Is this the right move for this? Are you surprised by any of this?
Well, I'm surprised at how quickly things are happening. So if you think about podcasting and how long did it take us to go from, 2006 when podcasting really started becoming a thing to, let's say, a year ago, and how things have accelerated since the pandemic. And yes, podcasting was very much a mainstream phenomenon, especially in the United States, also some other markets. But yeah, it's insane how much is happening. So I kind of have, even though I'm in this space as a founder, I look to you guys to keep me up to date with everything that's going on, because it's just too much to sort of source the news. I need to digest. So that's what I love you guys for.
So what does it tell you in terms of like what you're doing with GetVokl in terms of making podcasting interactive and helping to optimize what you can get out of it, right? I mean, you look at, like, podcasting has been around for many years. This is nothing new, right? It's like, turning an audio conversation into something that people subscribe to. Like, that was, early 2000s probably at the very least. But it obviously hit this renaissance with Apple and Spotify and everything like that in the past few years. But it doesn't seem like the innovation that we're seeing now is only kicking in like at this moment, right? But why is that? Like, what has held podcasting back?
It's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that, but I have some ideas, right? I think podcasting has been held back to a large extent because there was the lack of a business model, right? Like, you've had creators on all kinds of other platforms make it big, and podcasters are just recently starting to really have the ability to make an income. And what I mean by that is that the business model for podcasting has been ads. And that really only works for a very, very small sliver of the podcasters, which are the top of the top, who have an audience that's large enough for ad insertion and those kind of things to make sense, right? Yet you have this amazing captive audience. I think in, what was it, 2019 or 2020? I can't really remember exactly which of the years it was. 40% almost of the U.S. households were listening to podcasts on a monthly basis, right? So that is, if the lack of the business model has been holding podcasting back, in some ways. On the other hand, you have this amazing audience that is still growing, even though podcasting is very much mainstream already. And I think the magic here is that because podcasting has been so late to be commercialized, it is one of the mediums of digital content that is the most authentic, right? Because the folks, the creators, the podcasters in this case, that create, do it for the passion of what they're creating, more than the ability to monetize. And now I feel like there's, and not, I mean, it's sort of, we're seeing this trend being supercharged, but it's already been ongoing for a couple of years, right? With Patreon being one of the platforms that made it, gave lots of podcasters the opportunity to monetize that wasn't there before. I think now these two things are coming together, right? Where we're moving into the world where podcasters, like other creators, are able to monetize on lots of different platforms, and now really start to be able to leverage the incredible reach and audience that they have. And so now this is coming together, and that's why I think podcasting is having this incredible moment, with pretty much everyone wanting to be part of the party. And then, of course, the hype that has been sparked by Clubhouse accelerates this whole thing.
So you would say that the social audio space, with like all this live audio, is this accelerant in terms of how you do podcasting?
It's one component accelerant. I think it's not the main factor, I would say. If you say social audio, to me, that means live social audio, right? Like I still don't see Clubhouse figuring out how to create really high quality podcasts that are going to be consumed asynchronously. So I see social audio more as a subset of podcasting. So it's one aspect of it that I think has created a lot of hype. But the real trend is the convergence of model to monetize podcasting, and lots of the platforms like Spotify realizing, okay, podcasting talent, we're going to spend big money on Joe Rogan or whoever. I think that's almost the bigger trend that's happening, that there's all these ways of monetizing that go beyond just the ad model for podcasting, which was never going to make podcasting a truly commercial medium. And I think now that's happening, right? And so I feel that podcasting, if you think about the creative economy, if you think about the passion economy, podcasting is probably the content vertical that is benefiting from what the passion economy is the most. So
let's talk about the what you're doing with Vokl. And we have a question from Harrison. Is like, what do you think about podcasts by major broadcasters like MSNBC, right? And obviously, I guess in terms of the media, you look at like the New York Times, the Daily, there's a lot of these other major networks that are kind of doing it as an extension of, like, they have a tremendous reach traditionally anyways, right? Through television. Like I have no access to have that reach on TV or anything else short of the internet, right? But then they're also branching off into, hey, we're going to do this podcast so you can listen to it on as you go or whatever. What do you think about that?
So two questions, right? Overall, what do I think about major publishers, let's call it, that also do a podcaster? And I think, like the New York Times having a podcast, that's one category, or other big creators, let's say, that are YouTubers first, or other platform creators first that also do podcasters. That's one thing. And then the other thing that I see is podcasts or creators that came up as being podcasters, and the huge sort of long tail of that group. So if we look at the first group, which are publishers like the New York Times, and we've been seeing this for a couple of years, right? Podcasting is such a mainstream medium that pretty much everyone needs to also release a podcast, right? And that's just happening. That's adding to the available content. That's obviously increasing competition, and that's also, I think, making the discovery of podcasting more difficult, and with that opening an opportunity for players like Spotify, who've really said, okay, we want to curate a podcast and we want to solve the discovery issue with that, right? Then you have the group of, let's say, celebrities, influencers, who feel like, in addition to the book deal that they do, they also need to start releasing a podcast. I don't really have that much knowledge or also an opinion about that. I think it's proof that podcasting is such a established medium that you just have to do it, right? It's kind of like a newsletter. Everyone needs to have a newsletter if they're serious about anything. But then you have the group of creators who are podcasters first. And that's the group that I'm really excited about and that we're focusing on with Vokl, and where I feel there is lots of potential of helping these folks who in many cases are still not really pulling an income from their craft like other creators are, to an extent that they're able to, I don't know, quit their day jobs, right? These are like really normal people that don't have major exposure yet. And I'm saying yet because I think that there's not just us, but there's a bunch of other players out there who are looking to change that and give a whole new cohort of creators, podcasters in this case, the ability to quit their day jobs and really focus full time on what they're passionate.
So earlier on, Greg was talking about this report that had a bunch of statistics on the creator economy. One thing that has me startled is that there's less than half of those surveyed said that they're able to earn a livable wage off of what they're doing, right? Off of being a creator. And there's something that you said, Alex, of how people are trying to earn, like in terms of podcasting, they're not able to earn as much as probably those other creators that are using different form factors. Why is it that podcast creators aren't, there's that inequality in terms of that value? And then let's talk about what you're doing at Vokl, where, I mean, you're not just like, hey, we're going to help host your podcast. We're going to help monetize. We're going to help optimize and enhance what you have. So it's not just this audio file that people, can download onto their phone or listen to on, their computer or wherever on the go. Like, what is it that you're doing? What is that secret sauce that's really going to transform the landscape?
So the two things are totally related, right? To the first part of your question, why are podcasters behind when it comes to monetizing? I wouldn't say I'm an authority on this, but of course I have strong ideas. So first, and I think this is the major aspect, podcasting is a highly fragmented medium, right? You have, I think in the US alone by now, you have like close to 1 million podcasters listed on Apple Podcasts. And so the average audience is small, right? But that said, you have tons of podcasters who have an extremely loyal yet small and fragmented audience. And so the business model traditionally for, just any kind of content monetization online, which has been ad-based, just never really worked for these folks. It just didn't work, right? It wasn't worth it, essentially, for the advertisers to figure out a way to make the ad model work for this group of highly fragmented creators. and so that's, I think, one of the reasons. And then also, podcasts are a long form content type, right? Like you can browse through lots more YouTube videos in the time that it takes you to really be engaged with one podcast episode that might take half an hour or even more than that, right? So I think that's another aspect. And then finally, I think that because podcasting is an audio format, it doesn't really lend itself to all the online marketing magic that you can implement when you're watching a YouTube video, or when you're, I don't know, watching some Instagram influencer and there's a shop now button or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially the way that we think about podcasting is that the only way to change that is to also, and this is hard, right? This is really hard. The only way to change that is to also expand what a podcast actually is, right? So the first thing that you need to do, and this is what we're doing, is we're making it very easy for podcasters to add a visual component to their show, right? Number one. Number two, we're making it very easy for podcasters to do their show live. Why is that exciting? Well, if you do something live, same as we're doing in this show right here, and soon when we bring out our version 2 of the platform, I'm going to have a chat with you guys to move you over to our platform. But
was that a sales pitch right there?
Hardly. That was more like, that's going to happen, right? An announcement. But live is important because it gives you a totally different, or not you as a creator, but it gives your audience a totally different angle of access to you. That's what's exciting about live, right? And Clubhouse is totally proving that, like the magic of that immediate access. So kind of making your audience part of the content. But then also what we're doing, and this is something that we haven't done, so there's like GetVokl, that's like the 1.0 platform that we've iterated on a lot, and now we're about to launch Vokl 2.0. And what Vokl 2.0 has is, whilst enabling that interactivity to make your audience part of the content, it also has lots of features built in to help creators still run a really tight show, right? And so we're leveraging mental models from, TV or radio or all these kinds of things to allow for production value. And now that's really important because if your live show doesn't have production value and it's just an unstructured conversation, it might be interesting and appealing live, but it's never going to be appealing on demand and asynchronously. And so what we're doing is we're helping these creators, right, the podcasters, to add a visual layer, make it live, but at the same time enhance the production value so that they can, without much editing, create a asynchronous podcast episode from that afterwards, right? And then one of the things that we do is that we also record local audio tracks, so there's no infringement when the bandwidth sucks and stuff like that, right? So it's really sort of thinking about holistically, how can we leverage some of the best practices that other platforms have pioneered, like Twitch, when it comes to live monetization, those kind of things, but really tailor that to the creative workflow that podcasters have, which still at the end means you want to have a on-demand consumable audio only file that you can download everywhere, Spotify, wherever.
Are you you guys are, Vokl is platform agnostic, am I correct in that, like in terms of, say we take this show and we use Vokl, it doesn't matter that if we're like, oh, we see a lot of our audience on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify /Anchor /Green Room or whatever, like you play relatively nice with the distribution platforms, correct?
So we are not a podcast hosting platform, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're going to do is you're going to do your thing on Vokl, right? And then you'll have the audio recording in high quality, and then you just go and distribute that to whatever podcast hosting platform you want and make it go everywhere, right? So we're not competing with that process at all. We're just supporting it.
So what are the type of the creators that you're looking for? Like how long has Vokl been around? And for those that are listening or those that will be watching, like what are some of the creators that you're looking for? Obviously, you're not necessarily looking for those from the New York Times or MSNBC, although I don't think you'd be opposed to that. But like what are some of the creators? What kind of genre takes or focus are you looking at?
So we experimented with a bunch of different content categories, right? We even curated some. That was some experiments that we were running last year, where we said Wednesday night there's going to be, dating, relationship, and sexuality. Thursday is going to be True Crime Thursday. Friday is Fandom Friday, all about like nerd culture, and so on. And already, even though we only grew the platform to a couple hundred creators who were actively creating before we then sort of like brought it back to the garage in September of last year, it was super diverse already, I would say. So I would say that the type of creator that we're looking for are really those that in the beginning, and if the New York Times come knocking and say, hey, we love your platform, we want to use it, as you say, we're not going to lock them out. But the type of creator really that we're focusing on are those that already have a small core of super loyal fans that feel like the podcaster. And this is what's amazing about podcasters. Podcasters, I would say, are more loved than most other digital content creators. And the reason is that, you're not, like in many cases, podcasters aren't just a form of entertainment. Podcasters become a really important source of inspiration, of consoling, of whatever, right? Of advice for people in their lives. And so we're looking for people that have that kind of relationship and that kind of impact on the lives of their fans, whatever content they might be doing, whatever topics they might be covering, and who have not yet figured out how to really make a living out of that. That's who we're going after.
And so what are some of the, aside from this, like obviously we're 5 episodes in to the show. And, I will admit that this is the first time I've ever done, a podcast, right? Not sure if I'm doing it right or not, but like, how would you explain to me, like, what advice would you give to me and to future or current podcasters who want to, enhance their what they're doing, enhance their shows? Like, what are some things that we need to be thinking about in order to move to this next step? Because you're talking about interactive podcasting, and I'm like, oh wait, so I should just go on to have like all these bells and whistles and simultaneously stream not only through StreamYard but also do it through Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces, and then go on to LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitch and everything like that. And it's like this, how overstretched can you get? But it's like, is there a simpler way, or are we overthinking it? Like, what are some things we need to be pondering as we start to think, hey, I want to take this a little bit more seriously, or I want to make a living off of this.
So the first thing is, there are so many podcasters that if you just approach becoming a podcaster in the classical sense of once a week I'm going to release an audio only episode, I think it's going to be extremely difficult for you to reach any critical mass. It's just the competition is insane, and still discovery of new podcasters is a problem that is not solved nearly as well as, for example, discovery of creators on YouTube or Instagram or whatever other platform. So what am I saying is, I think you need to embrace the concept that we call interactive podcasting, that blurs the line between what is podcasting, what is, live streaming, and those kind of things, right? I think you need to think of it as, okay, yes, podcast first. It's about the conversation. It's about the audio content, but we need to have a visual component to make it more sticky, to make it more discoverable, to be able to send it to all these other places. That's one. Then the other thing, that's why I love the show that you guys are doing. You're making go to all these different places, right? And there's a bunch of built-in features that StreamYard already provides. But there's a bunch of other things that you guys are doing, or more or less hacking and putting together, right? And I watched the first episode that you guys did and was like, oh, all these buttons. I have my Clubhouse here. I have this here and that here. So we're not going to be perfect at this ever, probably, but that's really what we're focusing on. How can we take the pain, or put it this way, the skill that is required to do all of that, and reduce that skill level, reduce the hurdle, and more or less, even for someone who's not technically savvy, make that an available option. And the combination of the two, I think, is really, then you're really solving problems for people and giving them new opportunities.
You wrote a Medium post about the birth of interactive podcasting, and as you're talking, you mentioned Twitch, and there's a paragraph in your blog post that talks about how the transforming the way a podcast is perceived, right? I mean, I think we kind of default like, oh, is a podcast like just audio only, right? But then there's video shows like this, which technically is called a video podcast or a podcast. I don't know. It's like the definition is it's more like potato type of thing.
Yeah.
But but I'm curious how. I mean, and I think this is a good opportunity for Vokl, is how do you elevate the interactivity that to capture the success that Twitch had in terms of just live streaming, and take it and put it into the podcasting side, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, you can now go live with an audience instead of just having it pre-recorded, right? It's like instead of scripted, you can do now it's taped now recorded in front of a live studio audience, right? That's basically, you guys were ahead of Spotify's Green Room before they announced it today, right? Of course, they have a huge distribution and reach, but whatever. But you guys have been doing. But here's an opportunity for you guys. Can you talk us through what is the future that you're seeing in terms of the interactivity that you will be working on? I'm not saying reveal your product roadmap, although if you want to share, I mean, by all means. But where do you see interactive podcasts? Like, what is the future of that? Like, what can we expect in the next 2 years? I would say 5 to 10, but let's be honest, podcasting is moving rapidly. So are we going to start to see a lot of the interactivity that you would see on Twitch kind of now in powered through Vokl and really redefining what it means to have an interactive podcast?
So, I mean, I love that you mentioned it, right? You have podcasts, then you have a video podcast. We're talking about interactive podcasts. I'm trying to coin that term. I would like to answer the question by talking about what is exciting about the interactivity. Why even make it interactive? And I think Twitch has really proven that interactive at its core means that you're giving the audience an option to participate in the creation, right? They're there, and they can even, they can even be part of it, right? Their comments on Twitch, really, the interactivity on Twitch is actually very basic. It's just comments. But even those comments, and actually in most cases just like emojis, 100 of the same emojis, it's kind of wild that is even interactive. But what does it psychologically for the fan who's watching, that brings them so much closer to the creator, but not only that, also to the other fans that are interacting as well. And what that really does is build communities. And I think that is the magic of the interactivity. So interactivity for its own sake, who cares, right? But if it builds community, then something magical comes about it. And so this is really what we're trying to leverage and go way beyond just interactivity via chat, right? And so we look at it sort of as a ladder where you, as a fan of a podcaster, need to have very small little baby steps to ramp up how engaged you want to be and how much you want to interact, right? Initially, you might just be a fly on the wall and just watch what's going on, right? And we've seen that a lot on our platform. And then as you progress as a fan in these interactive shows, you might start engaging in the chat. You'll learn who some of the other folks are. Then you feel compelled to, I don't know, leave a donation for the creator. Now the creator recognizes you and maybe invites you to, jump on stage and come on video, kind of like a, call in, or the same thing that really happens on Clubhouse. That's, I would say, one of the major features on Clubhouse that makes it exciting, right? Where you blur the line between the creator, the audience, and now suddenly you have everything in between, where each and every member of the audience can also be part of the creation, even have, the limelight on them. And doing that in a smart way that sort of caters to all the little baby steps for all the different personality types, that's what we're focusing on, and that's sort of how we're building our features to make it easy for every different type to interact in the way that they would want to. And I mean, to give you an example of that, it's letting people come onto the Vokl platform from other social destinations to which we're streaming out, just like you are right now, and then inviting them in and saying, hey, if you come over here, you have the ability to meet the other true fans and come on stage with me. I don't know, be a sponsor of one of our shows and all those kind of things.
So as we talk about I think we are very much stretched thin as creators in terms of our presence, right? I mean, you have your Facebook presence, you have your Instagram, YouTube, you have LinkedIn and Twitter and your own blog. And then you have to manage your presence on, Spotify and everything. Like, it's like how, and one thing that you talked about here is like your Vokl is about building communities, right? And with this, and obviously the interactive podcasting capability makes it possible to do that. What is your pitch to creators, podcasters, our listeners, in terms of why this is a suitable alternative? Then, I mean, because you look at, I think the biggest opportunity advantage that these platforms have, these established platforms have, is the reach, is the distribution.
The crazy reach, yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
But if you strip that all out, I mean, it's all things relatively are equal for the most part. But then there's, then you judge it based on the features at its core, right? And it's like, how good are you? Like, what is the differentiator? It's like, okay, take away the price. What is the differentiating like, why would you choose product X versus product Y? So what is your pitch in terms of why a creator should bank on Vokl's ability to help them foster a growing community?
The $1 million question. So, I mean, reach, we cannot underestimate how important reach is. And so, like, we understand that we're sort of the David, and there's a bunch of Goliaths out there that we need to tackle at the same time. So what we think about is, why would a podcaster not adopt us? Like, why would they not use Vokl and try it out? One of them is, well, we already have this established creative process. If I'm going to do something completely new on Vokl, like, why would I even do that? And then sort of there's a big hurdle to do that and be an early adopter of the platform. And so what we say to these creators is, we can make the creative process that you have easier, right? Like, you can keep doing what you're already doing. In this case of podcasters, create a podcast, have guests on, record it, and then publish it to wherever you host your podcast. You can do that on Vokl, and at the same time, for free, right? We also don't charge you, by the way. For free, you're able to add something in addition that's not going to cost you much additional time investment. And so that's really the pitch, right? So, like, enhance the creative process that you already have, and more or less as a free lunch, get all these other features that might even supercharge what you're already doing. And then the other thing is, I kind of mentioned that, is the time investment. So if you think about Clubhouse, for example, I don't know, Ken, you probably know what the current statistics are for how much time an averagely engaged user spends on Clubhouse, but it's like hours every week, right? It's crazy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you see rooms still going 24 hours, and I've heard stories of people like, oh, I started a room, and I'm like, oh, 4 hours later, I'm still having this conversation about something that happened, days or hours or days ago. So yeah, it can be an addictive platform.
But who's it addictive for, right? And so we have tested this. And we even pre-COVID, we had the same behaviors on our platform when the rooms were more kind of like hangouts. And so that is not very scalable, I think. And that like a 5-hour conversation, no one's ever going to listen to that on demand. It's just not going to happen. And editing it down and having like the few juicy moments of the 5 hours, super difficult to do. And I think that our AI technology is far away from being able to do that in a good way. That's not totally awkward, right? You would still need someone to invest crazy amounts of time to edit it. Now, in the pandemic, everyone's stuck at home, and you have lots of people that I would say that would otherwise not have the time to spend hours on Clubhouse, do social audio, right? And so I personally don't even believe that if Clubhouse or Spaces or whoever keep doing what they're doing, what is currently, sort of social audio, that I don't think it's going to work post-pandemic. I think it's going to totally drop off. It's going to become boring, and it's going to become, kind of like what Google Hangouts used to be and became, right? So it's really, really important that the production value is high. That you think of these you think of these interactive podcasts still as a podcast, in terms of that it's a tight show,
right? And
that's really where we have very different hypotheses on the space and what interactivity means and what it should not mean. And I don't think it should mean just like hours of unstructured conversation, because that's not really in the interest of the creators. And yes, that also totally builds community, but guess what? not always healthy community. Like the more time people spend in these rooms, right, the lower your threshold for all kinds of nasty stuff gets, and then that's what happens, right? And so like, and then the lack of content creates an incentive to create artificial content. And artificial content in these hangout style situations often is sort of drama, right?
Right.
Like we've seen that. We were like, nope, we don't want to be part of that.
So you talk about AI. Can you dive a little bit more in terms of how you're using artificial intelligence to really to help with the podcasting aspect? Like what can creators expect using AI? I mean, obviously AI is I guess, and just a little tongue in cheek, like the flavor of the week in every tech service, tech startup platform that you use. But how does that help create a better podcast, in your opinion? Like, how is GetVokl using it?
All right. So the only way that we use AI right now, we have plans for the future, right? But the only way that we use AI right now is to optimize the video quality of the live show that you're doing, right? So we use it. So what we actually did when we sort of went back to the garage last September, we said before that we were using a vendor for all of the live video and live audio technology. And then, you know, when the pandemic hit and we saw our growth rates going crazy, we're like, damn, our platform is free. We can't afford doing this. And so we pulled it back into the garage and said, okay, we're going to build our own live infrastructure. So we did that. Actually, we're able to pull it off with a pretty nimble team. And so there are AI components in that to make sure that you have the best experience, even if there's, you know, some folks that have crappy internet connections or flaky ones or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're doing. Still, to be honest, at a pretty basic. I mean, everyone says that they're doing AI and whatnot, and I wouldn't. You know, I think the AI component of what I just mentioned is negligible compared to the technology that we've built otherwise. But then in the future, I think there's lots of AI stuff that you can do when it comes to the discovery and the curation of the content, and also help with editing some of the content later on. But those are really future plans. So I would just say, you know what, we're plain vanilla. AI is not a big part of what we're doing at this point.
Cool. I do have a couple of other questions, but I see we have some in our chat. So Harrison Rose, he's asking, like, what size listener pool does a podcast need to be self-supporting? Like, so in your is there a specific number to kind of like a minimum audience base that it says, hey, this can be a self-supporting podcast? I mean, obviously they'd have to be the podcast would have to be monetized. So any thoughts?
So there's podcasters that have a really, really, really loyal base of a couple hundred listeners, and they can make a living off of that. And then there's podcasters that have 100,000 listens, but they would never be able to monetize. So I think the question that you need to ask is more about what is the level of loyalty and love that your audience has for you as the podcaster, and then how many of those folks do you have? I mean, there's this piece that the 100 true fans, or you know what I'm talking about, right? What is it called again?
Oh, God. I know it's on
Lee Jin put it out, right? She was like, hey, you no longer need 1,000 fans, but you only need 100 fans that are going to pay you X instead of whatever. So I'm saying something that's similar to that.
Okay.
And so what you want to do is you want to take however many people, like whatever your reach is, and then send those people through sort of the community funnel, where initially there's sort of like a loosely engaged fan, and at the bottom of the funnel, they are like, they love you, literally, right? They love you and they don't mind spending money on the value that you give them in their lives. And so it's about what is that number at the bottom of your funnel, and because those are the people that are going to support you in making a living off of your craft.
So we're short on time. So the last question I have for you is, you look at the state of, like, with these big platforms like Apple and Google, they're taking 30% off of their commission, their tax, so to speak, on apps. And you mentioned earlier that you are offering a lot of these services in terms of interactive podcasting for free. So that begs the question, is like, how, if I'm going to use Vokl, or creators are going to use Vokl, what would they pay for in terms of like premium offerings? Do you have right now, or in the future that you might have coming down the pipe?
So the tool component of the platform are free, and it's our plan, and hopefully we can stick to that plan to keep them free forever, right? So like, we're not thinking about, offering you a basic version for free and then all the cool tools, all the cool features cost you. What we have already done is introduce live tipping, and monthly subscriptions is something that we're going to introduce into the new version of the platform, and then we take a cut of that. So our whole claim is, our success is your success, right? If you earn, then your fans are gonna pay for your use of the Vokl platform. So that's one. Then the other question that you had was about the Apple tax, and we actually put out native apps, and we also implemented the monetization there, and we were paying the same Apple tax as everyone else was paying. And in this new inception, we're actually not going to launch native apps, and that's one of the main reasons, that the business model just doesn't work so well. And so I think that there's other, big players that are trailblazing this whole conflict with Apple and Google to bring down what their app store tax is, because it just doesn't make sense for this case, right? It doesn't. Like, if you're, I don't know, if you're a game developer and you're, there's like purely digital goods that someone can buy to accelerate their progress in their game, fine, take 30%. But if this is a commission on what a creator is getting from a fan, then it's just not right to take that kind of a cut. And I think, hopefully some folks are going to, would like to see Patreon become more vocal about that. And by the way, just opening a web view and skirting, like putting the checkout into a web view versus natively in the app, that's not permitted by the App Store. So I guess that there's some good relationships between Patreon and Apple that sort of make that thing work. That didn't work for us. We tried it and we got like slap on the hand very quickly. So, but I see that falling, and if it's whether Apple and Google are going to realize that they should stop imposing such a high tax, or at least differentiate it based on what the business model is of the app. Or you're going to have, antitrust litigation make that happen. Like either or, it's going to come down sooner or later.
Cool. So, all right. So, Alex, where can people find you? Where can people find more information about Vokl? And what do you want listeners to walk away knowing about interactive podcasting?
You can find us on vokl.com or on social media at GetVokl. So we're kind of rebranding. We're losing the get because we kind of like make the dad. I'm a dad now, so I can make dad jokes. We got it. So we're losing the get.
And thank you very much. That's our time.
And then check it out. You know, what I think is the most important thing is that creators, like my whole, like the broader picture here is, you mentioned AI, right? What's AI going to do? AI is going to remove so many more jobs than have already been lost to automation, like in a massive way. And so being a creator, even if you're only inspiring 50 people, but you're really changing their lives, is a really, really meaningful thing to do, I think. And so if you have creators like that, whose content you interact with, pay them. Whatever the platform is, pay them, right? They're delivering so much value to you. Appreciate it. That's what I would love to say to folks, right? And that's completely independent from our platform. That's just very generally something that I feel passionate about.
Cool. Well, Alex, thank you so very much for taking the time to join us. I know I speak for Greg and I. It's been great to learn not only about like the future of podcasting, but how creators can really monetize and not really monetize, but really optimize and enhance what they're doing and make it more community focused as opposed to one-sided, right? And especially in light of and not having to be forced to go choose between like, okay, I'm going to have go live on these apps, but then have to have a separate service to do a traditional podcast, or whether it's audio or video. It's like if there's one place that I can do, there's a one-stop shop, I can do it all and have that Twitch-like experience. Was we all see the success that Twitch has had with their interactivity. So it'd be very. I'm very curious to see how that is translatable or transferable to this medium. So thank you so very much for joining us this week on the Created Economy.
Thank you so much for having me. And guys, thank you so much for the condensed wisdom that you're putting out. It's actually like, I love it. Really appreciate it. That's kind of also how we got in touch. I was like, I love the conversation. I like, this is I can get rid of 5 newsletters that I'm reading just by watching your show. So thanks for that.
And to those creators of those newsletters, we do apologize for taking away your audience. But thank you, Alex. That means so much. That's some great feedback, and that's encouraging for Greg and I to know that we are providing a valuable service to our listeners. So appreciate it very much. So cool. All right. Well, with that. I am going to wrap things up. So Greg will be joining us next time. But just a nice little note for next week. We are actually going to be off, but we will be back in the following week on June 30th with Mike Donahue from Subtext, a company I really admire in terms of this group texting out, this text messaging capability, and how publishers and creators can use it to really have another way to reach their fans and followers and everybody else. And then on July 7th, we'll have Matt Zuvella from FamePick. And then July 14th, we do have an opening. So if you are interested in joining us on the Created Economy, please hit us up at createdeconomy.com. We're definitely interested in creators and builders and investors within the space, and particularly keen on bringing on women and people of color and underrepresented groups. So if that's you, feel free to ping Greg or myself. And then July 21st, we'll have Super Vance Fernando Parnes joining us. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time. See you.